Somewhere along the way, Family Matters stopped being about the Winslows and became the Steve Urkel show. But not everybody was happy about it. Jo Marie Payton, who played Harriet Winslow, wasn't exactly thrilled watching a show about her family slowly become all about Steve. But here's the problem. Steve was working. The writers saw that people wanted more of him, so they gave us more Steve, until eventually the Winslows became supporting characters in their own show, and that's what makes this whole thing so crazy. Without Steve Urkel, Family Matters might not have survived. But because of Steve Urkel, the original Family Matters didn't survive either. But before we blame Steve for everything, we gotta be real about something. The Winslows were kind of boring. Now, before everybody comes for me, I'm not saying they were a bad family. They weren't. Carl was funny, Harriet was strong, the kids had their own personalities, and the family actually felt like a family. But in the beginning, what was really separating Family Matters from everything else that was already on television? The Cosby Show had already given audiences a successful black family. Family Matters gave us a more blue-collar version of that. Carl was a cop, Harriet worked, money mattered, the kids had school problems, grandma moved in, regular family stuff. And that's fine. But was it juicy? Was there something happening every week that made you say, I have to see what happens next Friday? Not really. The show had heart, but it was missing that one thing that made it unpredictable. Then Steve walked through the door. The glasses, the suspenders, the pants pulled up to his chest. That voice. And suddenly you never knew what this kid was going to do. He could annoy Carl without even trying. He was completely obsessed with Laura. He broke things. He fell over things. He walked into a normal Winslow situation and somehow made everything 10 times more chaotic. And people loved it. Steve wasn't originally the center of Family Matters, but audiences responded to him so strongly that the writers kept bringing him back. And honestly, can you blame them? If I'm writing a television show and one character suddenly has everybody talking, I'm giving that character more screen time too. That's just common sense. So before we go any further, if you're enjoying this video, hit the like button. It really helps the channel, and it lets me know you guys want more of these sitcom deep dives. Now here's what I think the writers got right at first. They didn't immediately turn Family Matters into the Steve Urkel show. For a while, the balance actually worked. Steve would come into the Winslows' world and disrupt it. That's what made him funny. Carl was this regular working father who just wanted some peace in his own house, and then here comes Steve. Laura wanted absolutely nothing to do with him, which somehow made Steve want her even more. Eddie thought Steve was a complete nerd. Everybody reacted to Steve differently, and that's what made the character work. The Winslows were normal. Steve was not. You needed both sides of that equation, and I think that's something the writers eventually forgot. Because Steve wasn't funny in spite of the Winslows. A lot of the time, Steve was funny because of the Winslows. Carl's frustration made Steve funnier. Laura's rejection made Steve funnier. The fact that this completely ridiculous kid kept showing up inside this otherwise normal family made Steve funnier. That was the sweet spot. But once the writers realized just how popular Steve was, they started pushing it and pushing it. And this is where things start getting a little ridiculous. Steve wasn't just the annoying neighbor anymore. Now he's an inventor. Then he's creating robots. Then we've got jetpacks, then potions, then transformation chambers. Then he turns himself into Stephen Urkel. And listen, I liked Stephen too. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I didn't. Seeing Steve suddenly turn into this smooth, handsome guy and watching Laura lose her mind over him was entertaining. But when you really think about it, Stephen represented something much bigger happening to the show. The writers had figured out that Steve could become whatever they needed him to be. Need the nerd? Steve. Need the handsome guy? Steve becomes Stephen. Need some crazy invention to create this week's story? Steve can build it. Need another outrageous character? Jaleel White can play that too. Eventually, instead of asking, what problem is the Winslow family dealing with this week, the show could basically ask, what crazy thing can Steve do this week? And those are two completely different shows. At first, Steve had to fit into the world of Family Matters. Eventually, the world of Family Matters had to fit around Steve, and that's when the title of the show starts becoming a little ironic. Because where was the family? Judy disappeared completely. Rachel became less important. Estelle wasn't around as much. Harriet, who was literally the character Family Matters spun out of Perfect Strangers with, wasn't driving the show the way she once did. Even Carl increasingly became the guy reacting to whatever Steve had done. Think about how crazy that is. The Winslows didn't just lose screen time, they slowly stopped being the reason stories happened. They became the people reacting to Steve's stories. And once that happened, there really wasn't much Family Matters left in Family Matters. But I also don't think the writers woke up one morning and decided, you know what? Forget the Winslows, they followed what was working. That's why this story is more complicated than just saying Steve Urkel ruined the show. The audience loved him. The ratings responded to him. So naturally, the writers kept giving us more. The problem is they learned the wrong lesson. The lesson should have been, Steve makes the Winslows more interesting. Instead, somewhere along the way, the lesson became, Steve is what makes Family Matters interesting. And once you make that switch, it's hard to go back. Because now you've trained the audience to expect bigger and crazier things. You've given them Stefan, you've given them robots, you've given them transformation chambers, you've given them clones and inventions that shouldn't even exist in the same universe as the first season. So how do you go from all of that back to Carl worrying about bills or Eddie having a problem at school? It almost feels boring now. And that's the trap the writers created for themselves. They raised the spectacle so high that the normal family stories couldn't compete anymore. Which is funny, because those normal family stories were the whole reason the show was called Family Matters in the first place. And this is why I don't really blame Jaleel White. What was he supposed to do? Be less funny? Be less popular? He played the character people wanted to see, and he played him so well that the show kept building around him. If anything, Steve Urkel worked too well. And maybe that's the real story here. The Winslows needed Steve. I genuinely believe that. Without him, I'm not convinced the original version of Family Matters had enough separating it from the other family sitcoms of that era to become the show we still talk about today. Steve gave them unpredictability, he gave them iconic moments, he gave the show an identity. But Family Matters needed Steve to be part of the family. It didn't need Steve to become the entire show. There's a difference. And once the writers crossed that line, the Winslows became supporting characters in the show that was originally built around them. So did Steve Urkel destroy Family Matters? I'm not sure it's that simple. Because without Steve, Family Matters might not have lasted long enough for us to be having this conversation more than 30 years later. The Winslows gave the show heart. Steve gave people a reason to tune in. The writers weren't wrong for giving us more Steve. They just didn't know when enough was enough. And that's the irony of Steve Urkel. He didn't destroy Family Matters because he was a bad character. He almost destroyed it because he was too good at being exactly what the show needed. So what do you think? Did Steve Urkel save Family Matters, or did the writers let him completely take over the show? Let me know in the comments. And if you like these kinds of conversations about the sitcom characters we grew up watching, go watch my video on Aunt Viv and how she became one of the most memorable characters on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And make sure you're subscribed because we've got a lot more to talk about.